Welcome to the Logistics of Logistics, a podcast dedicated to exploring how things get places and the people who get them there. We'll talk with logistics and supply chain leaders about innovation, industry trends, and the future of the logistics business. Now, here's your host, Joe Lynch.
Hello, friends. Welcome to the Logistics of Logistics podcast. My name is Joe Lynch. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's topic is supply chain lessons from Northwest Arkansas with my friend Donnie Williams. How's it going, Donnie?
Doing well, Joe. I appreciate you having me on the podcast.
Oh, I'm excited to have you on my podcast. We've been blabbing about this topic and other things for a while, so I'm excited to finally do this. Donnie, please introduce yourself and your organization.
Sure. Well, again, Joe, thank you for having me. I'm Donnie Williams. I'm a assistant professor of logistics and supply chain management at the Walton College at the University of Arkansas, and I also had the pleasure of being the executive director of the Supply Chain Management Research Center in the Walton College. And in that role, I get to be a connector between our supply chain program, which, shameless plug here, is to rank the number one supply chain program in North America by Gartner.
Very nice.
So we're pretty proud of that right now, and so we're hoping we maintain that spot this summer when the rankings come out again. But I get to play the connector between our industry partners here in Northwest Arkansas and around the country with our faculty, students, PhD students, master students, and so it's just a real joy to work here.
Yeah, and that's actually how I got connected with you. Ron Richardson from Turvo said, "Oh, Joe,
Right.
my son is in that University of Arkansas program," and I was like, "Well, okay, tell me more." And then he said it's one of the top supply chain schools in the country. And he says you got to talk to Donnie Williams. So here we are. And by the way, Ron is a proud Michigan State Spartan, and I know they also have a claim to fame on supply chain. I think it's amazing how many supply chain programs there are now. And I joke about it, but I remember probably 25 years ago, some recruiter was calling me and saying, "Really need a supply chain guy like you. You'd be a perfect fit." I kept saying, "What the hell?" I was saying, "What's supply chain?" It made no sense to me what he was talking about. I was one. I just didn't recognize myself as a supply chain guy. And now here it is. You guys are turning into not just an art, but a science.
Yeah, and so, it's just, I arrived here 3 years ago. I was at a small liberal arts college in the middle of Georgia called Georgia College State University. We had a logistics and supply chain program for 40 years that really served Robins Air Force Base there. But the opportunity to come here to the University of Arkansas, work with Dean Matt Waller, who, if you don't know, won the CSCMP Service Award 2 years ago. He's just a great leader in our academic industry and the industry overall. To work with him, Brian Fugate, who's the department chair here, and Brent Williams, and all the other great faculty we have here, I couldn't pass that up. And so my wife and I love it here now, and so we're fully put our roots down here in Northwest Arkansas, and just excited to be a part of the program.
So we'll get back to why we say Northwest Arkansas rather than just Arkansas in a minute.
Okay.
But Donnie, please tell us a little bit about you. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? Give us some career highlights before you joined up over at University of Arkansas.
Well, so I'm a Georgia boy at heart, and so finally got some things to root about this past year with the Braves winning the World Series. And my dogs finally winning the national championship. So.
And they whomped my Michigan Wolverines this year. Then.
Yeah. Sorry for all your listeners up there in Michigan, but it was Georgia's year, right?
we were pretty happy. It's not a bad way to be number 3. I'll take it.
That's right.
It felt like there was only 2 elite teams there at the end of the year. There was Alabama and Georgia, and then I'd call Michigan and Ohio State distant, the 3rd, 4th. Don't play at that same level. Sorry, Cincinnati, you're not in that. You're not in that next tier either.
That's right. Well, and so anyway, I'm from Georgia, born and raised, and so southeast Georgia, about a little town called Statesboro, Georgia, and you may have heard of it. Georgia Southern University is there. That's actually where I ended up doing my undergrad, master's, and PhD. I was a late I went back to school at 30 years old because I worked in construction. I did some other things, worked in some warehousing, and I was actually a project manager for commercial construction, and I was actually working at Georgia Southern University, managing their new construction buildings and renovations and all of that in my master's program. And so in that role, I was always a customer of supply chain, right? And so you kind of think about big construction projects. When you're managing those, boy, the 7 R's of logistics come into play pretty quick, right? So I need the right products at the right place at the right time because I've got a building to turn over to this customer. Right. And so when I was doing my master's, I kind of had this idea that I wanted to get a PhD and at some point be a professor. I thought that that would be in just management, right? Because that's what I was doing, project management. But then I was in my master's class and was taking operations management. We started talking about supply chain. I was like, to your point, it wasn't really
wasn't a
prominent word, right? And so I was like, well, what is this supply chain thing? And so the more, of course, in the textbooks, everybody talks about it from a product perspective, right? And so you and I have been talking about, in general, how really, if we can go back to Henry Ford and the automobile production, right? So manufacturing and kind of, how the supply chain kind of works out with that. Interestingly enough, Henry Ford was fully vertically integrated. And then we kind of had the outsourcing movement, right? So we focus on our core competency and then kind of outsource everything else.
Right.
And so, but from a project manager's perspective in the construction industry, looking at this was really a blessing for me because it just gave me a different perspective of what was happening. Because I don't know how much you know about the construction industry, but one of the things I really loved every day was having to bring people together to collaborate, to actually execute something, whether you're talking about architects, engineers, the project managers, the inspectors, the general contractors who are going to do the work, and then their subcontractors. So I'm talking about, in my world, I'm looking at, when I began to look and understand supply chain, I'm like, well, these are my tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 suppliers, right? And so, and then they've got all these goods coming from all over the world that have to arrive on this spot, on location at the right time to be able to execute and build together. And so it's really fun for me to kind of look at that perspective. I actually think it's helped me coming in now, what we call the retail supply chain, to kind of see things more systemically that way. And I fell in love with it in the master's program, decided to do my PhD. Georgia Southern was starting a PhD program in it at the time when I was finishing my master's, and said, hey, let's do this. And so all my degrees were at Georgia Southern, which is unusual, and most people would say, don't do that. And so, but I'm like, you know what, it ended up working out well for me.
Yeah, it worked out, and that's where you live. That's I always feel like it's and if you started at 30, but it's a little difficult to say, I'm going to switch gears and move the family around from place to place.
Right.
It's interesting when we talk about supply chain. We talk about different companies. So if you look at automotive companies, they always say, oh, those are manufacturing companies. Yeah. Why are they manufacturing companies? Because they manufacture stuff.
Right.
Well, they engineer stuff. Heavy duty engineering goes into developing a vehicle. Apple is not a manufacturing company. They're a tech company. Yeah. Virtually any other, so you look at Walmart, they're a retail company, but nobody calls themselves a supply chain company. And by the way, automotive, we always had purchasing, which was super important. We always had logistics, was super important. And we always had people who managed suppliers, supplier development, supplier management, all these different supplier quality, incoming quality. There was tons of supplier stuff. We never had it all under one group called supply chain. I suspect they do now. But it's interesting. In the olden days, companies like Ford or General Motors, some of these companies would say, we are going to do it all ourselves, vertically integrated. And then they got to a place where they're still doing the final assembly, but so much of it is now shipped in, so they'll get systems. So there's body systems that are shipped in, even painted.
That's
and you could right now say, yeah, we're calling them manufacturing companies still, but you could call them supply chain companies.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment, and I think the specialization that has happened, and we know that happened before efficiency reasons, right? Is that if I focus on doing one thing and that one thing well, I can become really efficient at it. And Henry Ford proved this on the production line, right? And the assembly line, right? So I can take a worker, they're going to do this one thing. Well, now if I extrapolate that across supply chains, or across companies and organizations, that, hey, you're going to specialize in this, then they can do it more efficiently.
Yeah, it's funny. I did a lot of lean and value stream mapping in automotive, and the Japanese really kind of popularized lean, the Toyota way. So we all studied all that when I was in automotive still. And what was interesting is they would always say, Henry Ford invented lean. They would say that. But I think modern day lean value stream mapping, they kind of took that over. And I know we've added Six Sigma to that since then. But we did lean within four walls, which sit within our factories. And then it grew. So when I was doing value stream mapping or lean, we were doing it from order to cash. So we were doing entire supply chains. And that was a fantastic opportunity because you get to see every last handoff, every last email. And so much of the supply chain now is information exchange. And it was fascinating. It's a cool way to learn that order to cash. And by the way, for those of you saying, I know what lean is, kind of, but not. I always used to say, just to keep it real simple, from the time I get the order to the time I get paid is my process. And all I'm doing with lean is saying, take out time, take out waste. Every extra step I have costs me money. So that's make it real simple on yourself.
And I would understand, and I would want the listeners to understand too. Lean's got a bad rap, through the pandemic, and so just kind of a quick plug here is that it's because people that are saying lean is a problem don't understand lean. So they're equating lean with low inventory, and that's just absolutely not correct.
It's
lean is
having the
right amount of inventory, right? It's having the right amount of inventory in place, and so
years ago I attended a workshop. I was an observer. So this friend of mine, Harry, was doing this, and he said he got up and he said, I've learned I'm a lean guy, I'm a Six Sigma guy, I'm this guy. So he went through all of his different trainings. He said. And he goes, and then he goes, actually, I'll take that back. I'm a recovering lean guy. I'm a recovering Six Sigma guy. And he says, now they're just tools. He said, for a while I walked around with them, and that was the hammer I had in my hand, and everything was a nail.
Peter Singh wrote a book called The Fifth Discipline, and he brings a really important point about this from W.E. Deming, who we call the father of the total quality movement, right? And so, and I think there's a real lesson here for all of us. And I make my students read an article about this. And it's called, It's the Learning, the Real Lessons of the Total Quality Movement. W.E. Deming actually hated that phrase, total quality management.
Right.
Because he believed it stopped people from thinking, which is what the real secret sauce was, right? With lean, with any of these tools, it's how do I get people to actually start thinking about processes end to end, so that they can understand and identify where problems are inherent. Same idea we get with the goal, right? So you go back to Goldrat's goal.
Right.
I want people to think, and if they do, then they'll continually learn, and then they continue to solve those problems.
Right. I'm in Michigan, and Deming did a lot of work, and so what I think where he became popular was right after World War II. The Japanese really embraced what he was doing, and because they wanted to rebuild their industries, and they took what he taught them and went crazy.
And the American companies didn't want to hear what he had.
Yes, to say. Exactly. They reinvented manufacturing, made it better. Right. And if it wasn't for the Japanese doing that, I don't know where the world would be, because we copied that.
Yep.
So years ago, I was on like a board of trustees for my old university. Cleary University was where I got my undergrad, and so they said, hey, we're gonna open this new building. We're gonna dedicate it, and we're gonna call it the Deming Building. It's gonna be all about quality. And being the big mouth I am, I said, well, you better hurry. He's not getting any younger. And so we met like a month later, and in the meantime, he died. And so it's like we got in there. There's a little bit of silence, and somebody goes, "Way to go, Joe." I was like, I shouldn't have said it. I know, but he was old, man. Anyway, Donnie, let's switch gears and talk about supply chain lessons from Northwest Arkansas. First off, why am I hearing Northwest Arkansas? And by the way, no, my sister lived overseas for many years, 18 years. So she always lived with Walmart people, always lived with all around China, Brazil, Mexico, South Africa. And she says, wherever you go, there's always Walmart people. And she says, and they're not from Arkansas. They're from Northwest Arkansas.
Right,
So tell me, why do we hear Northwest Arkansas?
It's something that I learned. I moved here 3 years ago, January of 19. And so all I knew is I was moving to Fayetteville or Bentonville. And Walmart's in Bentonville, and then University of Arkansas is in Fayetteville. And so I was still kind of learning the area. But I think it's because Northwest Arkansas is up here in this corner. It's kind of a plateau. And you've got the Boston Mountains and really the Ozarks kind of cut across the state. And so up here in this northwest corner, you've got these just this area that has really grown up together. And it's because, to put it frank, you've got four entities right here, right? You've got Walmart up in Bentonville. You got Tyson Tyson Poultry, which is in Springdale. And you've got J.B. Hunt, which is in Lowell, just south of Rogers. And of course, the first Walmart itself was actually built in Rogers, Arkansas, not Bentonville, like many people think.
So Ark Best is up there too, right?
Ark Best is just south, right? So it's about 40 miles south.
Oh no, are they in Southwest Arkansas? Don't start with that.
They're still kind of in the more northern part of western Arkansas, but they're close enough to really be a player here in Northwest Arkansas as well. There's actually, if you're coming up I-49, there's a tunnel that you have to go through as you're driving through the mountains. And everybody always says, once you go through that tunnel, you've arrived in Northwest Arkansas.
And so that's where basically the street turns to gold and everything's the colors are brighter. And
that's right.
It's funny. A guy I used to work with, Bill Hall, used to say, he goes, have you been to Northwest Arkansas? I said, no. He goes, I like Southeast Arkansas. He's a hunter. And he goes, I love that area. He goes, no one ever talks about Southeast Arkansas. He goes, it's a great place too.
He must love duck hunting then, because if you get near Stuttgart, Arkansas, which is in the southern part of Arkansas, then that's the duck hunting capital of the world. And so and it's just amazing. I was driving back to Georgia last year and watching the migration of the ducks come down. It's just amazing to watch.
Yep. So, Donnie, when we want to talk today about supply chain lessons from Northwest Arkansas, and I think anyone who's paid attention to what's gone on in retail over the last 50 years,
sure,
really the last 20 years for the whole nation, Walmart has taken off. And you mentioned these other companies that are also in Northwest Arkansas, which is J.B. Hunt, obviously very successful trucking company.
Sure.
Ark Best, another very successful trucking company, and Tyson Foods or Tyson Chicken, but I know there's more than just chicken at this point.
Sure.
And when we talked offline, you said there's just some unique lessons that have been learned here, and that can be kind of replicated elsewhere. But at least if you're going to understand logistics and supply chain, it's helpful to understand what some of the best supply chains are doing. So
that's right.
Let's talk. I think we identified 5 of them. So let's talk about the 5 lessons we can learn from Northwest Arkansas and all the players up there.
Yeah.
So what's the first one?
Well, and I think the first one is that I don't remember the order that you had it on your list there, but
I had co-location as the first one.
Yeah. So, and I think that's the point, right? Is that we've been studying Walmart for a number of years. If you're studying supply chain in general from an academic perspective, you're looking at Henry Ford and your world up there with the auto industry. The next one we look at now in modern is Walmart. What Sam Walton did, his strategy. To keep costs low by integrating both warehousing and trucking within his own firm So there's an element there that we talk about with vertical integration that he did, and if I can cut out that middleman, I can keep those costs low. But I can also buy more products by putting it in my distribution centers and doing that. So we've studied that for years, right? And this is how Walmart became Walmart. Sam was just a very shrewd businessman, and he was wise. He understood how to compete.
And part of that co-location is co-location with all his suppliers. So if you're a supplier, and let's face it, a lot of the Fortune 500 companies are suppliers, and they end up living, at least I should take that, all of them. They end up with offices in Northwest Arkansas, and that's because they're collaborating, they're innovating, they're working closely with Walmart, and that's where that co-location ends up adding value. You know, we're all used to working remote right now, which is fine, but let's face it, the nature of working remote is you jump on a call for an hour, you go into the office one day a week or one day a month, and some of the informal stuff, some of the casual conversations are lost. When you have an office in Northwest Arkansas, and let's just say you're one of the big CPGs, your purpose is to go see the boss, Walmart.
Right? Well, you know, and I think that grew, and I think, you know, part of what I was just kind of building to there is as Walmart began to grow, they weren't the major player, right?
No.
So they were competing against Kmart, Sears, and some of these other big companies. But that rapid growth, you know, so Procter & Gamble was the first one that came here out of the big suppliers. And
they probably helped themselves quite a bit by doing so.
Oh, yeah, they did. And, you know, interestingly enough, Procter & Gamble's offices here are in Fayetteville. And so not Bentonville or Rogers now. But, you know, they collaborated. They were one of the most strategic suppliers with Walmart. They invented, with Walmart, co-invented CPFR, as we know it today.
Wait, what is that?
It's collaborative planning, forecasting, and replenishment. And so how can I take the point of sale data and get it to my suppliers as quick as possible so that they know how much inventory is coming through and is needed in the system? So how do I collaborate together? But if you think about it, what is it? CPFR, and so Don Bechtel, who's actually executive in residence here, was with P&G at the time and helped develop that. And one of the things that he made sure that they talked about is like, it's not enough just to do forecasting together. We have to plan together. And so this gets to this idea of like real collaboration between companies where, hey, we're not working against one another. We're working with one another to win that final customer. And so so this is that kind of idea that we talk about where you really begin to get in this thing where it's not companies competing against one another, it's supply chains competing against one another.
Right.
And so, well, certainly Procter & Gamble's the first, right, that they have an office here. Well, now there's over 1,500 suppliers that have offices here. Yeah, here in Northwest Arkansas. And we're not talking about small offices either. We're talking about teams of 25, 50, and in many cases hundreds of people with these suppliers that are here to serve Walmart as their customer and, you know, plan together, collaborate together, and work together. Now, what happens with that co-location that you're talking about? I'll give you a great story about this. So I was before I moved here, I would tell people, you know, they'd ask me, hey, what do you do for a living? Well, I'm a professor. Well, what do you teach? Supply chain management. What is that? So, no idea, right? So I was used to having my spiel together. Hey, here's what supply chain management is. I moved here 3 years ago, and I'm kind of out and about in the community, and someone would ask me, hey, what do you do? Oh, I'm a professor at the university. Well, what do you teach? Supply chain management. Oh, okay. Everybody knew what supply chain was because either their wife worked for one of the suppliers, or they worked for Walmart, or they worked for J.B. Hunt, or their best friend did, or something like that. So
yeah, I'm an automotive guy, as you know, and originally, and that has been something we've done in automotive for a long time. Is if you're going to, and by the way, that kind of when you co-locate, that means, hey, we're opening an office in Mexico City, and we need you to have a presence there, or we need you to have a facility there, maybe production facilities there. If we're moving to Europe, if we're moving to China, so after a while, it became important to have that co-location. And by the way, as a product development guy, I spent when you're in a Ford building or General Motors, Stellantis, Nissan, any of these buildings, so often there are suppliers that are part of that development process. So it's hard to say who's who. And
That's right.
that, again, I think the nature of that co-location is better understanding your customer, better understanding, just the casual stuff. And I'll throw this out there. This also speaks to something that I'm near and dear to me is I never liked the idea of transactional partners. So I always say, we're not going to date. We're not going to be engaged. We're getting married. And when you say that somebody's co-locating, they aren't going to co-locate. Procter & Gamble wasn't co-locating there on a whim. I suspect they said, we're talking to Walmart, and Walmart's going to make this commitment to us, and we're going to make this commitment to Walmart, and we're going to be hand in glove here. We are going to work together for a good long time. And if I'm going to put a whole bunch of people there, that's what the expectation is. And that means you've got to vet people. That means vet companies.
That's right.
It also means you probably weed out people who can't make a commitment. It also weeds out companies that are maybe too small to make a commitment. And if they can't deliver on the promise that they make, they can't be part of the co-location. It's just not the nature of the beast.
And one of the really interesting kind of phenomena that I've noticed here is, Walmart gets a bad rap in the press and things like that. They don't treat people well. And, I'm like, nah, you don't understand. Like, I've talked to so many people that have worked for Walmart over years, and I cannot recall one person that had a negative experience working for Walmart. Almost all of them like, this is just a great place to work. I've learned so much. They invest in me. They give me opportunities. But even more than that, amongst the suppliers, I never hear negative things talked about, like ever. I have ever heard it. And so it's just a real collaborative environment, because what happens, Walmart, like every big company, goes through a restructure every now and then. They change direction. And I've watched this personally. Last year there was a massive restructure. Greg Smith, who was the EVP of supply chain, left. I had Jeff England, who was SVP of supply chain in my leadership class. He was he'd been with Walmart for 17 years. He's now with Napa as the EVP of supply chain for them. But one of the things that I always found is that everyone is grateful for the opportunity Walmart gave them. And many of them end up going and working for suppliers or other companies. Many of them stay in this area and really help the suppliers understand how to work better with Walmart.
Right.
And so you have this kind of unique, kind of collaborative environment where everybody kind of knows everybody, and they're working together, and they're trying to solve the problems together.
Right. It's interesting. I think one of the challenges with when you said people, Walmart gets a bad rap. One thing I will also say is, I read an article years ago, and it said there's probably no company in the history of the world that has done more for poor people than Walmart, because those always low prices, that's no joke. They are delivering on that. Right. I think Aldi's growing and probably saying, hey, we're right there, right? They've done that.
That's a point. Yeah.
And I'll throw one other thing out there is, people say, yeah, but they don't pay their people well enough to live. If you're working retail. I do know Walmart has a policy of saying whatever metropolitan region we are in, we will be the highest paid retail workers. I know one of the challenges we always have here in America is we want the olden days where somebody could get out of high school, go work at a factory, and make a really good living. And now we want retail to replace that. And I joke about it on my podcast, government people, if you run for office, politicians, they have a manufacturing fetish. They think we're going to go back to being, hey, I'm going to get a job in manufacturing and I'm going to make $100,000 a year. Those guys are gone, not only here, they're gone worldwide.
Yeah.
We are using automation. And retail, it's one of the jobs you don't necessarily need a degree for, is not going to replace that. And especially at Walmart, where the focus is on how do we keep the costs low? Because that's their mission. Which brings us to the next point, which was understanding the why. You told me that was one of the lessons you've learned from Northwest Arkansas.
Well, I learned it before I got here, because I knew Sam's
Yeah,
story.
yeah. You were a PhD before you got there, so you knew
And
these
so,
things.
well, and again, you study, and actually, before I was a PhD, I studied Sam Walton. In my master's program, I was studying him, and one of the fascinating things about me was Sam, and because how does a guy from Southwest Missouri, which is where Sam grew up, receive the Presidential Medal of Honor, right? For
Right.
for Walmart. How does that happen? Sam grew up in the Dust Bowl in the Depression, and so Sam grew up in poverty, and his mission. And a lot of people don't know his story, right? But he grew up in Southwest Missouri. His family was poor. He watched poverty all around him, and so his mission became: how can I raise the lifestyle of the poor? How can I give them access to goods so that they can live better lives? That is still the mission of Walmart today, right? And so they deviated from that a couple of times, kind of in the early 2000s.
And I want to point out, not just poor people are going there, but it is, if you contrast their demographics there and say Costco, Costco's got a pretty wealthy clientele. I think it's over $100,000 a year on average.
Mm-hmm.
Walmart is much lower, but again, I've shopped there. I'm not poor, but I love those low prices.
Well, and I think, and everybody does, right? And everybody's like, well, they got low prices because they pay their employees not very well. That's absolutely not true. It's a talking point, but it's absolutely not true. I can't remember if it's Walmart or Warren Buffett, but both of them have created an incredible amount of millionaires throughout their lives. And I can tell you, we were talking about those manufacturing jobs. Where those manufacturing jobs went, they went into supply chain. Because supply chain folks are paid pretty doggone well. And so we move a lot of stuff now, and we store a lot of stuff, and we facilitate the movement of those goods. And by the way, the country still produces the second most amount of goods in the world today. We still manufacture a lot of crap.
The difference is, in the olden days, we didn't have the automation. Now, if you look at the investment per employee,
that's right.
It's 10 times what it once was. So, and thank God it is, because if you ever go into a true manufacturing environment, those people would go to work. And I think that's where the manufacturing fetish breaks down. If you go, hey, I'm going to call my grandpa who worked at a manufacturing plant and say, hey, back in the good old days when you worked at that plant, he's not going to talk to you about good old days. He's going to say, you could go to the work, you could get hurt, you were going to get tired, you were going to get dirty, you were going to get sweaty. That was not pushing papers around like what we do or clicking on computers all day. One other thing I'll throw out there about Walmart, if you look, I think they're responsible for 10% of the imports from China. I haven't looked lately. In the last generation, 50%, or I should say 500 million people in China came out of abject poverty and became middle class.
That's right.
Walmart is responsible for 10% of that. So you could say easily 10% of China's poorest of the poor are no longer there. And somebody might say, oh, I don't care about China, but it doesn't help us to have poor neighbors. Right?
That's right. And, to the point about why, again, it's like, Sam understood his why. Every decision he made in business was about the why. Why do I own my trucks? Why do I own my own DCs? Why am I doing this? Because if I can save money there, I can pass that on to the customer. I can raise that lifestyle. And, to the point, we talked about this. I think it was the early 2000s. Walmart was watching Target. And we could kind of see that there was this little, hey, we don't want to target, we're ultra competitive, right? We want to keep our market share. Right. And so if you, for those of you, many of your listeners may remember
that means
this.
Fear of missing out, by the way.
Right. So many of your listeners may remember this. There were certain brands that started popping up at Walmart. And so they started elevating their brands a bit to a little bit, particularly in like clothing and places like this. And to really compete with Target is what they were doing. And for the first time in their history, they started slowing down in their market share. And so they were like, this isn't working. And then there was an ad campaign that came out called Back to Basics.
Right.
And I remember that vividly. Like, I think it was around 2008 or 2009. It's like Walmart was going back to their basics of being the low-cost provider. And so, again, with all of that happened, they still went back to their why, and they talked about Sam, our founder, right? And even today, when you hear the leadership at Walmart and talking, they go back to Sam. This is what Sam's values were. This is what Sam wanted, because they understood they're successful because Sam understood his why, and that has never left the company.
Yep. And if I could throw one thing in there, I'm in Michigan where we had Kmart. Kmart's no longer, I don't think, but
Yep.
I know that every once in a while you hear a store close, another store close. Now I think there's one somewhere, but Walmart and Kmart were in basically different planets. They were in different worlds. They were so far away from each other. As Kmart grew out of the Midwest, their whole thing is they would send you circulars, so you would get these things in the mail on, we're having a blue light special on this. We're having a blue light special. And the blue light special was literally that. Somebody pushing a cart with a blue siren and through the store, the blue light special. So you'd run and you go get something very inexpensive. Those circulars, those advertising circulars were very expensive. Managing your inventory that way is also expensive because you don't know what you're selling on any given day.
Yep.
If you look at Walmart, they don't do a lot of coupon stuff. They are focused on always low prices. So they are saying, so what they did a long time ago, pre-internet even, there was a time, they focused on let's manage our inventory really well.
Yeah.
But when you want to manage your inventory really well, you don't do sales.
That's right.
And if you want to keep your costs down, you don't do expensive mailings to everybody, sending them. So it's interesting. Operational excellence is part of that mission. So
That's right.
Walmart has always been exceptional. And by the way, as of late, I don't know this, I didn't ask when we were prepping, I think Walmart was the ones who said on time and in full, OTIF, which became... Which is
it's the industry standard now, right?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a religion. I'm not positive, but I think it's a religion now.
yeah. And so they put a lot
So
of pressure
on time and in
suppliers.
full is just one more drive towards operational excellence, which is really woven into everything we're going to talk about here. And so is innovation.
Yeah.
So you can't deliver on that message of how do we, and again, understanding your why. Your why is to deliver this promise of serving the poorest people in the country, along with the rest of us. I don't want anyone listening say it's only poor people go there. Is being operationally excellent, and that you mentioned owning some of their own assets and having their own warehouses. That was part of that mission. I suspect if it stops being if it doesn't work, they'll get rid of them.
That's right. And to your point, so that other lesson that we were talking about was that they're constantly pushing innovation.
Yes.
So, which is really fascinating to me because most people think about, well, you can't be low cost and push innovation. And I say, no, you absolutely have to be innovative if you're going to remain low cost in today's world, right?
Right.
And so that's true with all the companies here that, we got the Fortune 500, the three big anchors here in Northwest Arkansas we've already talked to them about J.B. Hunt, Tyson, and Walmart. Walmart is becoming a digital company, right? And that they recognize that they have to be that. They've created the culture for that. We'll get to that later. But they have certainly said, we are not going to stop with the status quo. We're going to keep innovating. We're going to keep pushing so that we can serve our customers the best way possible. J.B. Hunt, same thing. In fact, Shelley Simpson, who
I want to get her on my podcast. She was supposed to be on, and we I don't know what happened to our calendar on that, but I'll have to double check.
She's a great guest. I mean, she's just an awesome person, just in general, just as genuine and just a great leader for the company. But you know what? She has this kind of thing, like we disrupt ourselves. We're constantly, how can we disrupt ourselves? So the whole JB Hunt 360 thing that came out, and they've continued to tweak that and push the envelope with it. We talked about, when COVID hit, they were the first ones that came out with the electronic bills of lading to help processes be easier for their drivers and for their customers. And so they're constantly pushing that envelope. They would consider themselves a digital company. You and I didn't even talk about Transplace, which, by the way,
that's right.
Here.
I didn't know
they're
that.
They're here in Rogers. Their headquarters is in Dallas, but their largest office is here in Northwest Arkansas. and they're managing what is $12 billion of freight right now. So their transportation management spend is bigger than Walmart's, and what they're doing. But they too, they're a digital company. We were just bought out by Uber over this past year,
Yep.
and they're kind of in that process right now. Tyson, a protein company, right? And so they recognize we're more than just meat, right? So they're
More than just poultry.
More than just poultry. So they've acquired, Jimmy Dean sausage, Wrights and
I was
Ballpark.
when we were prepping, I was being a cranky old man by saying I'm tired of going places where they say, "Oh, would you like the protein bowl?" I was like, "No, I would like chicken and rice and some vegetables."
Right, but to their point,
Donnie will have the
Tyson's
protein
company-
bowl.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Tyson's not the company you would think about in your mind that you're getting like Beyond Meat, and some of these alternative meat protein
Right.
products, right?
So-
But that's what they've done.
So that's an interesting thing. So I remember back from business school, I'm sure you studied this too, is how companies define themselves as important. So a lot of railroad companies at one time, they just called themselves rail companies. And as things moved to trucking, they didn't see themselves as trucking companies. We're just railroad.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, there's a role to stay in your lane, of course.
That's right.
But companies that define themselves a certain way stay on that path, and that's why we already talked about your why and understanding where you belong in this world.
Yeah, and I think it's really hard because as growth happens, the danger is I want to be all things to all people.
You get complicated, you get complex, and
Right.
and costs go up and quality goes down.
That's right. So I think the lesson that we can really take away from here is that as I'm innovating with my customer in mind. And so
Right.
what is it that the customer comes to me for?
With that purpose in mind too, right?
Yeah. This is who I am. This is my core competency. This is who my customer is. How do I serve that customer better? And then I'm really focused on that, and that
Right.
helps drive a lot of the innovation that I drive.
So we talked about a few of these. So first we talked about the co-location, how I can collaborate with my suppliers, how
Yeah.
I can innovate with my suppliers. We're all close together. We've made a big commitment. We're all gonna hold hands and sing Kumbaya. So
That's right.
and you can't always do these things kind of remotely as much as we all like it. The second is really understanding their why. And you said these companies in this region have really done a good job of understanding their why and making sure they stay aligned to that purpose.
Yeah.
The third one we talked about is, and this applies to all these companies, is they really innovate. Even though they're successful, they don't stop innovating. They don't settle with what they have. They're always looking for the next great thing. So what's another lesson we can learn from Northwest Arkansas?
Well, I know you and I talked about this a bit, just to kind of get on that collaboration side, but to build over to the culture side. And so, the story that I've heard since I've been here is that Walmart had an opportunity about 25 years ago where they were really trying to figure out, they were looking into the future, like we really need to attract good talent. And so, well, how do we attract good talent? And so what that means is they understood we've got to pivot. Our way of doing business has to change. We can't operate the same way, even though our why is the same. We've got to innovate. We've got to become a more digital company. They really started seeing kind of, okay, there's this Amazon thing growing up over here.
Right.
If we're going to operate in the next 25, 50 years, we've got to be able to attract more talent. And so that means we need to be in a place that talent wants to live and work. So they were toying with the idea of, this is my understanding, and you can't nail me down to the wall on this, but
Oh no, I make stuff up all the time on here, Donnie. Don't worry about it.
Well, and everything I've kind of talked to different people, I believe this is true, is that they were toying with the idea of moving to Dallas, which makes a lot of sense. Growth market, a lot of talent in
Right.
that area, and moving their headquarters there.
Great city.
But my understanding is that the Walton family, who still has pretty good bit of influence here, right? Stepped in and said, no, we will make Northwest Arkansas a destination. And so they started pouring investment into the area. And so that's whenever Crystal Bridges, just a world-class museum that rivals anything you would see.
And that's
in
one of
New
the
York.
Walton daughters
That's right.
funded that, I should say.
That's right. Alice Walton funded it. It's free to the public. It's mostly her personal art collection, but also they bring in exhibits. It's just an incredible space.
By the way, I saw an article in the Wall Street Journal about that not so long ago, and it is truly a world-class museum. And I think this is, you mentioned culture, but think about the culture that Walmart would have had they moved to Dallas. And who knows, it might have taken off and been even more successful. That's hard to believe. But what's interesting is the decision to stay where they're at was say, hey, look, we're going to develop our own culture, our own place, our own community that we understand, that we get. And
they understood the talent that they needed to bring in too, right? And so all the companies did. So what do people want in general? And so if we understand we need tech talent, what are the things that tech talent really likes? And so what are the kind of cultural things in the area that they live that they want to have access to? Well, let's take advantage of our surroundings. We have the Ozark Mountains here. They're beautiful. Mountain biking. So the whole biking community. So the Walton grandsons are big mountain bikers. So they started just building all these trails and investing in all these trails that's free to the public. And now Bentonville calls itself the mountain biking capital of the world. And they host professionals from all over the world. Fayetteville just a month ago held the world championships in cyclocross racing, and never been done in U.S. soil.
Right.
And so there's all these mountain bike parks. There's road biking. We have within an hour you can do rock climbing here, but you've got the Buffalo River with kayaking, world class hiking. And so they really took advantage of the natural terrain and the things that the community offered together, and really started investing in that together. And it wasn't just Walmart. J.B. Hunt's doing it as well. Tyson's doing it. Suppliers are doing it. They're all investing in the community. Now, what's interesting and what's great is that all these companies invest in whatever community they're in. They're all over the country, right? But I know that in my corporate headquarters that I'm going to have to bring talent in. I'm going to invest in the community. Why? Because people not only work there, but they live there, they play there. They want their kids to have a great experience growing up. They want their families to enjoy living there and have amenities that they can be a part of.
Yeah, I love that they're not trying to be Silicon Valley. They're not trying to be Dallas.
That's right.
And I spoke to Craig Fuller on my podcast a few years ago about why Chattanooga is the Silicon Valley of trucking, and he talked a lot about Chattanooga. So it's always had a lot of trucking companies, and then because of some of the brokers that did done extremely well, it all of a sudden became this freight brokerage place. Then all of a sudden it blew up and became a freight tech place, and then Freight Waves becoming basically the leader in not only the data but also the media. It all of a sudden it is attracting a lot of people, and I just had Matt McClellan on my podcast, and he was talking about stop coming to Chattanooga, because what was not so long ago a polluted backwater is now attracting companies and attracting people who say that looks like a pretty nice life. And again, they've got some of the same natural beauty that
That's right.
you guys have down there, and they're taking advantage of it. And I think, we don't all have to live in New York or Chicago or Silicon Valley to be successful. And I think there's a lot of people who, especially if you got some kids, you go, I wouldn't mind having a little bit of land. I wouldn't mind having a little bit of woods around me. Nice lifestyle. But I think this also speaks to the culture that the company was trying to develop, which is, if we move to Dallas or we move to Chicago or somewhere else, do we lose who we are down here in Arkansas?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, there's a lot to that. One of the things that's been really impressive to me since I've been here is how many people I meet that get moved here by their companies. Most of them are suppliers, right? So I got 1,500 suppliers here, and they're moving people in and out all the time. But these people, once they get here, first they're like, where's Northwest Arkansas? Why do I want to live there, right? And they get here, and they start living, and they start experiencing this. Oh, this is a great community of people who all do what I do. So we're all kind of connected anyway. They're turning down promotions to stay here. Right. They would just, if I can't stay in this role, I'm just going to go to another company because I can use my talent here because we're all kind of working on the same thing. And so they're turning over, so you're kind of constantly seeing this. But the other thing, to your point that you talked about with Chattanooga, what is it attracting? And so here, along with this great culture that has been developed around these companies and the way these companies collaborate together as well. Now we see a company or an investment firm or accelerator like Plug and Play, a Silicon Valley company that comes in here and says, we're going to set up our supply chain incubation place here in Northwest Arkansas, because these companies, Walmart, J.B. Hunt, Tyson, Arc Best, Georgia Pacific, who also has a presence here, are partnering with these startups. They're funding 60 of them per year to help.
That's part of that innovation.
That's part of that innovation. So now, as a big company, how do you innovate? I use startups. I partner with them. I let them come in. They can test and experiment with what we're doing. And so that happened. And then you've got now drone company, manufacturing companies are moving here because, hey, Walmart's testing drones. They're using drones. It just was announced, like I said earlier, you and I were talking about this mobility. Transportation mobility, huge investments are happening here in Northwest Arkansas, and companies are moving in. The Governor, Asa Hutchinson, just announced that a few weeks ago. That's a partnership between the university, Walmart, J.B. Hunt, Tyson, and others that are coming in and funding and working together and collaborating with these things to solve societal problems now. So now it's not just, hey, we're working for the supply chain for retail. We're trying to figure out how do we make society better.
So one of the things I think we came close to it, but we didn't talk about it necessarily, is really understanding their market. So these companies that we just talked about really understand their market. And I'll give you some examples from Walmart from my own studying. So I mentioned how 10% of all exports from China were to Walmart. That was good. That allows them to deliver inexpensive goods. I know here in Michigan, people are always like, buy American, but and I'm not against that, but we don't make T-shirts here. We don't make ball caps. So Walmart got flack for that, and I remember being at a Walmart, and there was some guy walking through, and his wife was saying, "What about this?" He's like, "Made in China," because he's looking at T-shirts, and he's like, "Made in China," and I was like, I didn't want to interrupt, but I was thinking, dude, they don't make T-shirts here. That's the problem. So you can buy a $12 T-shirt at Walmart or make your own, right? Mm-hmm. What was interesting about that is now I've seen they have a big program to how can we make it in America. So they heard the market speak, and they said, look, our goal is to have this low price, and we know low price comes from China, but if we can develop some suppliers here, some entrepreneurs here, and they can make stuff here for us, we'd love to say we buy American. So I think that's a fantastic listening to your market and making a change. Another thing, when they're getting a lot of flack for not paying enough, for all this, they became really a company focused on sustainability. The nature of their business is not sustainability. I mean, when you're selling food and all the products they sell, people are going to throw that out. Stuff isn't going to end up in the landfill. But when I was still moving freight, I had a solar panel company that we moved a ton of stuff to, and it was all Walmart buildings. Walmart, high schools, hospitals in Vegas. This was a long time ago, solar panels on all their buildings. And I don't know where that went, if they're still doing that, but their trucks that they're making, they are focused on sustainability because, again, I think they listened to the world, they listened to the market and said, this is what we need to do.
That's right. And I think it's two things. So I listen to my customer, right? So I'm focused on the customer. That tells me who I am, right? And so this is kind of who we're going to be, how we're going to compete in the market. But then I have to understand the market, like what's happening in the market around me, in our industry. And I can see kind of things that are going on there. And now, if people aren't paying attention to, now Walmart has a lot of stores in China, so, right. But if you're not paying attention to what's happening,
I never go to those ones.
Right. And so, well, certainly they're the American dream company, right? And so here's a guy who started with nothing, dirt poor, grows up, built this multi-billion-dollar, maybe trillion-dollar company, and well, he's expanding. By the way, let's think about this. The reason Walmart is what they are today is because they are within 10 miles of 90% of the U.S. population. Like, their stores, they have the
Yep.
largest footprint in the country. They can serve more
Yep.
customers than anybody else. In
If you
fact,
let
if the U.S. government had just kind of listened to them at the beginning and said, "Hey, why don't you distribute our vaccines?" it would have been done efficiently and effectively, right?
that brings up another thing we talked about. Again, listening to your customer. Healthcare costs and the hassle of it is a big problem here. You know, you try and get in to get a checkup or just little things. It drives me crazy. And my doctor's pretty good about this. But if you just said, "Oh, I got a cold and I just want some antibiotics," and you call and the doctor's office says, "Yeah, we'll get you in for a week, 2 weeks from tomorrow," and you're like, "I'll either be better or dead by then," right?
Yeah.
So Walmart is opening up all these health clinics, and it's cash only, and I think a lot of these I think the average visit's less than I think it's $30 or something, and I don't know where those are located. They're not by me yet, but I also saw that from Meijer, which is just like Walmart. It's only in 6 states up here in the Midwest, but I got my flu shot there, and they also said, "Hey, do you want?" They gave me my COVID shot and my flu shot. And they gave me a hangover without the booze. Yeah, so it's all listening to that market. And again, I think these are great lessons. I think these are 4 great companies. I want to summarize this, then I want to get your final thoughts on this, Donnie. I know I'm going to lose you. So the topic is supply chain lessons from Northwest Arkansas. The first one is, Donnie explained what Northwest Arkansas was. So the first one is co-location. They got all their suppliers together, and really with the idea that we're going to collaborate. Big commitments were made, and when you're close to your suppliers, you have the ability to innovate, collaborate, and good things happen from that. Secondly, they really understand their why, and in Walmart's case, which we touched on quite a bit, their why was serving some of the poorest people in this country. Number 3, we talked about innovation. Even though these 4 companies we talked about, Tyson, Walmart, ArcBest, and JB Hunt, they are always innovating. And if you're going to stay with that, you're going to continue to be successful. You're going to have to innovate in this market. Next one we talked about was they really understand their market. They understand when there's a new hole develops in the market, or they start hearing something different from customers. When they start seeing their world change, they change with it. And again, that was with Walmart, with the sustainability, with if we have to pay more to people, we're going to do that. The health clinics, just all these things that tell you they weren't staying the same. They said as the market moved, we moved. Last but not least, we talked about just the cultures that these companies developed. And again, with Northwest Arkansas, I love the story about Walmart potentially moving to Dallas. Even if it's not true, it's an interesting thing to think about. How did staying in Northwest Arkansas and them investing in that community like they have? By the way, guys, I've not been to Northwest Arkansas, but I might go to the FreightWaves conference that's going to be down there not so long from now.
Yeah,
but,
you need to.
But if you just Google Northwest Arkansas, unbelievable pictures out online about that place. I think that must be the tourist bureau down there. But all the cities that make up that region, unbelievably nice down there. And again, you look in FreightWaves and the guys that are doing logistics in Chattanooga, same lesson to be learned there. They could have said, we're going to move to Silicon Valley. Wouldn't that sound good that we're in San Francisco or we're in one of those cities? But nope, they stayed home and they built a cool little world right in their backyard.
And Joe, one point I would say about this, I tell people all the time, like, this is what it looks like when you have your major anchor companies in your community give back to their community.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
What it can do.
I'm from Dearborn, Michigan originally. Mm-hmm. I joke about it. Every school I went to was named after a Ford family member. Every park I went to was donated land by Henry Ford. Mm-hmm. To this day, they're building a huge campus there because they realized competing for engineering talent required them to have a campus, not the old style thing. And they constantly, Ford Land Development, which is still one of the largest land development companies in the world, spends big in not only Dearborn, but the Detroit area. Yep. And by the way, when they built one of their electric battery plants out of our state. It was shocking. It was like, oh my God! Thank God General Motors kept theirs home. But anyway, final thoughts on this. Put a bow on it, Donnie.
Well, and I think, so for any listener out there, I think, we're talking about lessons from Northwest Arkansas, right? From, 3 and 4 great companies that are here. But really it's kind of this idea in my mind, and it's honestly what I just said. If I can get really smart, great people to work together, collaborate together for the benefit of not only their companies, but their customers and their suppliers, and even more importantly, in my mind, their communities, man, this is easy. I don't want to say easy. You have to have the right people. Right. You have to have some serendipity in place, right?
Got to make some money, too. It doesn't work.
You got to make some money. But this is not rocket science for how to cultivate this type of thing. And you've already mentioned that we've seen this happen in Silicon Valley with the tech industry. We're seeing this happen in Chattanooga. If companies can look outside of themselves, figure out really how to collaborate across the supply chain. That's what supply chain management is, Joe. We talked about what is supply chain management. Well, I had all these different functions in the company doing their own thing. Supply chain management, how do I align them together to work together collaboratively and work across organizational lines collaboratively? And now if I can do that, then I can do that in my communities as well. And I can make the world that we all work, live, and play in better together, right? And so to me, that's the lessons that you take from Northwest Arkansas. How do we win together?
Excellent. So before you go, are you going to go to that conference when Freightwaves goes down there?
I will. I'll be there. We
what
need
date,
to find each other.
What date is that?
It's in May, I believe. So hang on. I'm looking at their events here right now. So 3PL Summit 22, is that what it is?
What I'll do is I'll put
virtual.
I'll put a link to that in the show notes. So anyone who wants to go to that conference. And again, I think this speaks to the success of Northwest Arkansas that Freightwaves is having an event there because
it's May the 9th and 10th.
May 9th and 10th.
Yep.
So maybe I'll see you there. I got a lot of traveling coming up this year. Got a whole bunch of weddings, so man, it's hard to get to other things.
Everybody's backed up from the past 2 years and not being able to go anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. So, anyway, what else is new over at University of Arkansas? Tell us a little bit about your programs, not just your 4-year degrees, because I don't think anyone's jumping in on that just right.
Well, our program's great. We got some world-class faculty here. I can't remember the rankings that we are. I think we're in the top. I know we're in the top 5 of publications, I believe. We're doing some great work around the intersection of, you're talking about healthcare, the intersection of policy and supply chain. We've been working on that for the past 3 years, the research center, with some folks even at Michigan State. So Jason Miller up there, if you talk.
Yeah, Jason's been on the podcast a few times. He's excellent.
Yeah. And so we're working on that. We're working on some cool stuff. Some of our PhD students are working on some cool stuff on AI and machine learning and its impact on forecasting, that type of thing. We're doing some really cool stuff on a new initiative that we have is retail supply chain initiative, looking at out of stocks and how retailers are kind of battling these out of stocks. Working with that, looking at. We've got an initiative on supply chain China relations, and so kind of what that looks like. We've actually been, one of our professors, John Ken, has been working with Walmart doing a food safety program in China because Walmart's invested there so much. And so a lot of cool things going on. Do
you have certificate programs there?
We do have some certificate programs. You can look at, those are in our exec ed programs at the Walton Supply Chain. We also have a Masters of Science in Supply Chain Management. That's an online supply chain with some face-to-face components to it. That just launched this past year. We're in our second year. Dr. David Dobrikowski.
Send me those links and I'll put them in the show notes in case somebody's interested. The certificate program and the Masters, it might be something that interests people, especially the online. I think that's no one wants to move for a Master's program.
That's right. And to your listeners who are looking for some undergrad talent, we graduate 250 great supply chain students every year out of, as Gartner would say, the #1 supply chain program in North
Exactly.
America.
Exactly. Well, it makes sense. I mean, it makes sense. It's funny. The universities usually take on the complexion of their neighbors, and
That's
so obviously the companies we talked about today know a thing or two about supply chain. So it makes sense that it would rub off on the university and what they focus on.
And the great thing about that is those companies give so much back. They're in our classrooms with us. They're providing projects for our students. They're giving opportunities for internships and work for them. So our students come out of our program well prepared with industry experience, ready to go.
Excellent. Donnie, thank you so much for taking the time.
Joe, thank you for having me. It's been great.
Yep. And thank all of you for listening to my podcast. Your support's very much appreciated. Until next time, onward and upward.
You've been listening to the Logistics of Logistics podcast, where we engage in conversation with experts in the logistics field. For more details, visit thelogisticsoflogistics.com or follow Joe Lynch on LinkedIn.